This show is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as legal advice. Always consult an attorney for legal advice. Views expressed by guests of the radio show are individual opinions and not endorsed by Maitri.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Maitri show Between Friends. In this show, we will be talking about different issues related to intimate partner violence, family violence and abuse, gender-based violence, and power dynamics in relationships. The goal of our show is to engage our community members in addressing and challenging those harmful social and cultural conditions, norms that make intimate partner violence, family violence and abuse, and other gender-based violence acceptable. We believe our show Between Friends will mobilize our community in ending victim blaming and preventing violence and abuse in partner and familial relationships. In each episode, we will be providing insights and resources that will not only help victims and survivors, but also educate our community members about these issues. These resources and that are available in the community so that they can help someone in need. Tune in every Saturday from 3 to 4 p.m. on Radio Zindagi to listen to the Maitri show Between Friends. You can also find all episodes of Maitri's Between Friends on our website, Maitri Bay Area Facebook page, and on SoundCloud. You can email your suggestions and feedback to us at maitri@maitri.org. Together, we can end domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and gender-based violence. In today's episode, I am your host Nandini Ray, and we will be discussing a very important social issue, and that is teen dating violence. At the beginning of the show, I would like to share some statistics so that you know the seriousness of this issue. According to National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, nearly 20.9% of female high school students and 13.4% of male high school students report being physically or sexually abused by a dating partner. 57% of teens know someone who has been physically, sexually, or verbally abusive in a dating relationship. 50% of youth reporting dating violence and rape also reported attempting suicide. 43% of dating college women reported experiencing abusive behavior from their partner. It's a huge statistics. And when we are seeing these disturbing statistics, we all must remember that dating violence, sexual violence, and abuse, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, these are always underreported crime. Various research findings show that the effect of teen dating violence on physical health, mental health, and educational outcome is significant. Youth victims are more likely to experience depression and anxiety symptoms, engage in unhealthy behaviors like using tobacco, drugs, and alcohol, exhibit antisocial behavior, and even think about suicide. So it is not easy to understand the complexity of this problem, and it is important that we start talking about this issue. Many times I've seen that many people are uncomfortable discussing this problem, this issue, and I think it is important to know that what young adults and our teens are thinking about this problem. The language used by teens when talking about their dating relationship may be unfamiliar to adults, including their parents, service providers, and unless we understand how teens and young adults are seeing this problem or facing this problem, we won't be able to assess the depth of this problem. So I'm glad that today we have with us some young adults as our guests. They are Navdeep Kaur, Javier Ortega, and Manrit Dhariwal. All of them are college students and very much interested in discussing this topic. Having been teenagers fairly recently, I believe they can bring teen perspective into the discussion. I think by acknowledging this problem and having multiple discussions on this issue, we will be able to raise awareness, and ultimately, I hope, we will prevent teen dating violence. So welcome you all, welcome our guest, and Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners? Say something about you.
Hi everyone, my name is Javier Ortega. I am a senior at Santa Clara University studying political science and ethnic studies, and I was born and raised in San Jose.
Hi, my name is Maitri. I go to Santa Clara University. I'm a third-year student majoring in communication and ethnic studies, and I'm very passionate about social justice issues, so I'm happy to be here today.
Hi everyone, my name is Navdeep Kaur and I go to De Anza College. I'm a second-year student and there studying political science and sociology.
Thank you all. Thank you for coming to our show. While you were teenagers, I'm sure you saw this problem in the teen community and all the challenges associated with it. So I would love to get your perspective on the issue. So tell me, what is a healthy dating relationship in your opinion, and how can one identify the dating relationship they are in is not healthy?
So in my opinion, I think healthy relationships include good communication, and by that I mean like they aren't checking each other's phones, aren't like asking each other for their social media passwords. I'm talking about like, like you have trust in the other individual and vice versa. From my experience, I think it's not healthy for individuals to always be on each other's phones, like, oh, who are you texting, who are you calling, like who's this person. It's not that healthy signs of a relationship.
So I agree with Javier on that. And recently I took a relationships class at De Anza for my major, and we were talking about relationships and that usually people can identify if their partner is being abusive by what Javier said, by checking each other's phone, always controlling the other partner or telling you what to do, which is not healthy at all for the relationship. And you should have a say in like what you want to do, what you want to wear, who you're friends with, and all of that. And your partner should definitely not be controlling of who you're friends with and who you're not friends with, or basically anything that you like doing or talking about, or anything that relates to your life that you love doing.
I think Javier and Navdeep pretty much covered everything. I would just say that realizing when you're in a abusive relationship, I think that's the harder part. Like Navdeep said, obviously, like, you know in your mind that, okay, wait, like, this is not right, this person's being controlling, or this person's being abusive. But I think when you're entangled in that manipulation, it's very hard to get out of it, especially when you're a teenager and you're still new at it, and you don't have much support because you're still finding your place of acceptance, whether that's within high school or whether that's at home.
So what I have been hearing from you, that healthy dating relationship involve honesty, trust, mutual respect, and open communication between dating partners. And there shouldn't be any imbalance of power between them. Partners should respect each other's independence, can make their own decision about, if someone can make their own decision without any fear, and, they should have equal say in decision making, right? What do you think?
Yes, I agree. I believe that there should be mutual respect amongst both partners, and there shouldn't be like power dynamics, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like there shouldn't be like, one has more stronger say than the other, especially if it's a heterosexual relationship. The male shouldn't be always the one that is dominating the relationship. Like, oh yeah, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that, because that's a very common theme. Obviously, it can happen either way, but it's more common that the male individual is the one with the power balance.
Yeah, many times, sometimes when people start new relationship, they don't understand what is healthy and what is not healthy, what is toxic relationship, and they just suffer in silence without even understanding that what is happening with them may not healthy. So this is very important that we discuss this problem among us as a society, as a community members, as college students, as friends, and I have seen that people are very open and very comfortable discussing terrorism, discussing gang violence. But when it is coming to dating violence or, domestic violence, they feel shy, they feel uncomfortable. And that shouldn't be the case. And we must discuss this problem. Otherwise, we won't be able to find solution. For today's teens, I think digital technology is an extension of their everyday lives. I see my son, who's a teenager, always on the phone. So digital abuse also is a growing form of abuse, which can include unwanted repeated calls or text messages, private violations such as breaking into email or social networking accounts, and pressure to send nude or private pictures or videos, So this is growing, I think. I want to share a story here. Once a college student told me that she had her first boyfriend when she was 15 years old. And her boyfriend used to send her about 20 or more text messages every day. He wanted to know her every move. He wanted to take the final decision on everything related to her. So initially she thought, oh, it's so romantic. He loves me more than anything. As he's always thinking about me. He's only thinking that how he can make me happy, something like that. But after 2 years, she started feeling suffocated, and she understood that it was not love actually, it was possessiveness, it was control. So when she wanted to break the relationship, and at that time it was, nightmare. He became so violent. Actually, he couldn't take the rejection. And he became so nasty on social media, published her intimate photos. It was very bad. So do you think digital abuse is prevalent in youth world? The story I shared with you, can it be an isolated incident or is it very common in youth world? So tell us about digital abuse, how prevalent this is in youth world.
I think digital violence is very prevalent within teens. I think the first time that I heard about it, I think it was in the 6th grade, and it was before like Facebook and social media was really taking off. So it's really kind of evolved as technology is advanced. I feel like it's very prevalent. So
you said 6th grade.
Yeah.
So from 6th grade, kids are so active on social media?
Yeah, in today's age, yeah. I know my little cousin, he's in the 5th grade. He has his own Instagram account.
Wow.
He never uses it, but he has it. He has a Snapchat account
so
as well.
If they have access to it, they can use it to abuse someone, right? Like bullying.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah, go on, please.
Social media can be a tool, but it can be a tool for dating violence as well. Bullying, harassment of different kinds. I feel like I've definitely experienced that from middle school onward. It's been very prevalent. I've always heard about it, I've always seen it, and I feel like it hasn't really ended. If anything, it's gotten bigger and bigger within the teen community.
I would say digital communication has actually transformed into a form of abuse, just because I feel like before there were disagreements between friends, peers, whatever it may be, and I think since as the social media platforms are progressing, that's why we're finding ways to use abuse on social media as well, right? And so I think for me personally, I didn't really experience any digital abuse in middle school, but in high school it was very big. I remember a lot of people getting their nudes leaked, and so I think that was probably one of the biggest problems within my high school, was that I always heard about it. And I think I actually didn't make any social media account until I was a sophomore, so I wasn't very familiar with it, but I always heard my friends going through it and stuff happening, nudes getting leaked, all these different pictures getting leaked, and it was a mess. So I think it's very, very common within the teenage community.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Manreet. And like Javier was saying, kids at a very young age have started to use social media. I remember even when I was in 6th grade, Facebook was a really big thing back then, and now it's Instagram or Snapchat. I feel with social media, we're not blaming it, but kids are definitely using it to attack or abuse other people through it. Even simple things oh, you didn't like my picture, you didn't comment, or you haven't messaged me in this much time or whatever, you haven't seen my stories, or just small things like that start huge arguments and end relationships, no matter how ridiculous it sounds, but that's just what it's come to.
So I have one question in mind, that what can teens do to avoid digital abuse? What do you think? What can they do?
This is a difficult one, but I would say if you want to avoid it all, the best way is just to not have social media.
That will be very difficult for many teens, right? If we are as a parent, if I'm telling my son don't have a social media account, will that be easy? As a mother, I'm very concerned that can we say that to our teen children?
Probably not. I feel that has to come from them. you know, like there has to be like, you know what, like everything that's going on, like depending on the situation, right? But like they may be experiencing some form of abuse, and they're just like, you know what, the best way to avoid all this is just delete my account, stay away from that space. But that's also a very difficult decision. But like others have said, like they've joined social media late, or they guess it's not their thing. I know a lot of friends from high school didn't ever have social media, don't even use social media now. So it is possible, but it is depending on the situation.
It has to come from them, right?
Yeah.
So parents, if they're telling them that do not have social media, they may see it as a controlling parent. And what I'm understanding, we can do one thing, we can talk about the issue, what kind of danger they may see through social media abuse, and we can only raise awareness by communication, by discussing the issue and problem. And what about you, Manreet?
I think everybody has like their way to deal with stuff individually, and I think necessarily parents should not tell their kids to not have social media, because that's just, I feel like that's just like teenage 101, right? Like when you tell your kids not to do something, they're going to do it. And I think, so I think that would probably not be the best way to go about it. But I think more so like normalizing that idea of that, okay, there's a possibility that you will get abused, or there's a possibility that this will happen. Just having that in mind will really prevent them, you know, like feeling isolated from, you know, from being able to express their feelings if, you know, God forbid they are in that situation, right?
I think like what Manreet said, like parents shouldn't like, you know, tell their kids, because like kids are going to be rebellious, but also that kids or anyone, teenagers, they should keep in mind that like just in case this happens, like they should share it with someone. And if they can't share it, like maybe avoid social media for a while. Like I had a friend like who went through that, and like just like being away from social media really helped her for a while, you know. So that's one possibility.
Thank you for sharing your thought. Listeners, if you are a teen and listening to this show, then I would like to say that it's important to know and exercise your digital rights. You have the right to turn off your phone and spend time with friends and family without your dating partner getting angry. You have the right to say no to sexting or sending pictures or information digitally to your dating partner and you are not comfortable with. You have the right to keep your logins and password private. You have the right to control your own privacy setting on social networking sites. You have the right to feel safe and respected in your relationship online or off. I would also urge you to visit National Domestic Violence Hotline's website to get more resources and information on preventing digital abuse. So those who are just tuned in, we are discussing a very important, very serious community issue, and that is teen dating violence. I'm your host, Nandini Ray, and I'm discussing this topic with 3 college students, Navdeep, Manreet, and Javier, at the Maitri show Between Friends. Let's take a short break. We will be back soon. So let's continue our discussion. Do you think teens are equipped to identify abuse in their relationship? Do they get any training from their parents or family members, schools or community, how to identify abuse in dating relationship or how to talk about this issue? Let me ask you a personal question. Did you feel equipped to identify relationship abuse when you were teens? Anything you can share?
I think personally, I was not equipped because I didn't have any information from my parents or from the school about what dating violence was, or like if I were to, you know, like, or what positive signs and what toxic signs were in a relationship. I didn't have any of that information. And I think not just like talking about myself, I think a lot of like my friends and like other people that I interacted with in high school, a lot of them went through similar situations where they found themselves like in situations, you know, that like either abusive relationships or, you know, like digital abuse, like they found themselves going through this and they were not equipped. And like, I think talking to like the school counselor does not really help because like,
really?
Yeah, I think like, yeah, that's that's there and like, you know, that's a resource for you. But I think schools do not really do a good job with providing counselors. And I can even say that about Santa Clara University. Our counselors, well, luckily I found a counselor and like I could connect with her really well, but I feel like in terms of diversity too, like we lack diversity within our counselors. And I think that's a really big issue because if teenagers do not have a background, like connect with their counselor, with an adult whom they need to like trust, right? In order to really talk about their pain, to talk about their abuse, then they're not gonna share. And then that's when, you know, depression, suicidal thoughts begin.
So it's good that we are having this discussion for our community members on a community platform. I'm so glad that you three came and you are willing to discuss this issue. So Javier, what do you think? What's your thought on this?
Yeah, I agree with what Maitri said. I think teens are generally not prepared to handle dating violence or social media violence or just harassment in general. I feel like it's for various reasons, but it's very hard for students, especially students of color, I feel, to talk about these issues with their parents. I feel like it's a two-way street, but no one's really crossed any other side. So it's very difficult for, I guess, for parents or like family members to open up with their children about this and vice versa, especially if they're teenagers. And just like what they're exposed to, like for example, like it's very easy for an individual to just make a fake social media account and then bully an individual or harass an individual. And sometimes when those situations happen, when harassment happens, they don't know who to go to. Like Maitri said, they don't have an adult that maybe they really trust, whether it be a counselor, a teacher, a uncle, whatever it is, right? Like they don't have that individual in their life where they feel like that trust to open up about what they're going through and what to do about the situation.
So it is very hard that if they are going through any abuse in their relationship and if they cannot share that pain with their parents, family members, and on top of it, if they don't have any system in school or in the community that they can get help from, then it is, I can understand the pain they go through. Hearing from you too, it's really... I feel that it's really our community responsibility to make a platform or to make a culture in the family or in the communities in school, so that teens, they feel comfortable sharing their pain with us, with adults, with trusted adults, and they feel comfortable sharing their problems with each other, and they get some resources so that they can get right help. Navdeep, what do you want to add? Do you want to add anything? Any personal story? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate a little bit on what Manrit and Javier said, and also add on a little bit about friendship. I think if there's like any type of abuse going on or like to identify it, people usually go to their friends first because like they're more trusted friends in order to get advice or something like that. But there's only so much that friends can do, especially if your friends have like never met your family or something. There's only so much that they could do, and that's usually when they refer you or give you advice to go see a counselor or a therapist at school. But like Manrit said, counselors and therapists, there's definitely a lack of diversity there. And personally, I have been to a therapist at Notre Dame de Namur University. I went there for a year before transferring back to De Anza. And although like he understood my problems that I was going through at the time, but it's just like so hard to talk about what you're going through already, but then also having to explain the cultural aspects of that. And when I came to De Anza, like right now, I have an advisor and she's very nice and understanding. But then again, there's that lack of culture and lack of diversity. And it's just hard to explain everything all over again. And then having to explain why it's happening or like what's the reasoning behind it. Or the cultural reasonings, which is like usually the aspect behind it.
I think just like adding on to that, I think lack of cultural sensitivity is like one of the key factors of, you know, like teenagers going through stuff and then not being able to get out of it. Because I think also like we have a community problem to like not see mental illness, or if somebody is going through something internally, to not see it as a form of pain, right? If somebody gets hurt physically, we're very caring. We're like, oh my God, what happened, right? And we're ready to take action. But when there's somebody's going through something emotionally, something that's internal, we don't really pay attention to it. We neglect it in a way, right? And that's when that whole isolation, depression, suicidal thoughts comes in, right?
Yeah, and I was reading an article that teen suicide rate is really increasing, in a very scary rate. I mean, this is high time, I think, that we need to talk about this issue. We need to understand, we need to acknowledge that teen dating violence, suicide, this kind of thing is happening with our teen children, and we must discuss this issue to find a solution. And many times I have seen that people are community members, adult community members, they are not comfortable discussing this problem, and they think that if we don't discuss this problem, it will go away. I'm not talking about all community members, all adult members, but I've seen a couple of adult members. I've seen that they have this kind of attitude that, oh, we are parents, we are adult, we know everything, we don't need to learn from our teen children, and whatever we will say, they will do that. It's for their own good. I understand that all parents, they want best for their children, and I'm a parent. I also think sometimes maybe I know the best, but I know everything. But then again, I keep reminding me that no, it's important that I should have a conversation with my teen children, and to understand what they are facing, what they are going through, and what kind of challenges they see every day in their life. Because teen world is completely different from adult world. And as an adult, if I claim that, oh, I understand everything, what is going on in your network, in your community, that will be a wrong, false claim. So it is important, I think, though I am very glad, I'm very hopeful that our community is a progressive community, and they are trying their best. Many people are trying their best to raise important questions, discussing important social issues that are affecting our families, our individuals in our communities, and want to find a solution. But at the same time, I would say that this is a long way we have to go, and communication is the key. Communication is very important, to have a clear communication, a proper communication with our children and with teens, to understand what challenges they are facing, and how they can solve the problem. And it's not that if we are talking about this issue only in our families or in individual level, that nothing is going to change. We have to bring that discussion on a community platform, in a community level, so that all of us can attend the discussion, all of can share information, knowledge, so that we can make a beautiful, safe future community. So I was actually, since all three of you are from immigrant communities, and I'm also from an immigrant community, so I just wanted to know that, do you think immigrant parents are not comfortable talking about dating violence with their children? And if that is the case, what can parents do to help? As a parent, I really want to know, how can I start the conversation with my teenage boy and teenage son, and what immigrant parents can do to help their children to understand the problem they are going through? Do you think that we are not doing enough to understand our children's problem?
In a way, yes. I feel that parents have to build a strong relationship with their child where there's trust. And I know it's difficult to open up about certain issues such as dating violence or dating in general, because it's a very taboo subject. Obviously, if you look back 20, 30 years ago, how teenagers were growing up, it was very different. So all this is new to both the child and the parent, right? Like this is a whole social media technology, like this new era. It's very different, especially with all the statistics that you've thrown out already. It's very different to how it was a while ago. So I think parents have to understand, like you said, like we're not perfect. We're human beings. We come from like our cultural aspects, like we're different, right? Like we're an immigrant community, but we have to acknowledge that we can be better. We can improve. First step is within yourself, and then going about that. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that.
So I think, and going back a little bit to the previous question, that kids don't open up about abuse to their parents or digital abuse, any type of abuse, because like Javier was saying, parents need to build a trusting and honest relationship with their children. And I feel like in immigrant communities or immigrant parents usually don't like to do that. Not that they don't like to do that, they're just it's very hard for them to open up about such subjects. And like you were saying, Nandini, before, it's they just think that it'll go away, or like my children won't do these things if I don't talk about it with them, or they're not going to learn about it if we don't talk about it at home, you know. So I think that's one of the reasons children aren't able to open up to their parents.
Or maybe, do you think maybe sometimes parents think that, I cannot even imagine my 16-year-old son or daughter, they are in any kind of relationship. They're child, they're children, they're children, and they cannot think of dating someone, or dating relationship is a completely unknown subject to them. Maybe that is the reason they don't talk about it, or they are hesitant to talk about it. What do you think? Can be, I mean, how naive we are. I mean, I'm a parent, I'm a mother of a teenage son, and I sometimes think, if I think that my son is not thinking of other girls, is it naive? Is it, I mean, you can, I really want you to talk about this issue.
Yeah, I definitely agree that a lot of parents, especially immigrant parents, think that because, like we were saying before, teenagers like 20, 30 years ago, it was way different. There was no social media. Like teenagers didn't like go out and meet each other, like just openly. And now everything is different. There's social media to interact with if you're in a long distance relationship, or people are able to like make all kinds of excuses to go out, so I definitely think that is something that parents should take into consideration, that just because your child is not talking to you about something, that doesn't mean that they don't know about it or they're not going through it.
I think adding on, when your teenage years, you're not with your daughter, your son, your child as much, right? There's 8 hours of school, then most of us have extracurricular activities, right? Anything. There's like another 2 hours there. That's 10 hours. When do you see your kid at dinner, right? Mm-hmm. And I think as you grow older, you barely want to talk to your parents anyways, right? So I think in that, I don't blame parents for thinking that their kids are naive or they're not going to do anything, because you barely interact with your kids in that way. You barely see how they are outside of, your home place, right? So you barely see that. But I think you have to normalize the idea of dating, right? And I don't think you have to normalize the idea of like, oh yeah, well, like in freshman year, you have to have a boyfriend. No, I'm talking about normalizing the idea that there could be a possibility that you do get abused. There could be a possibility that your kid is going through something. And I think it's very important that you talk about that. You talk about what dating is. You talk about what abuse is. You lay out those issues in front of your kids, because without that, there's always be that what if, right? Oh, well, what if my kid isn't doing that? Or what if my kid is doing that, right? It's better to just clarify it and let your kid know that these things exist. This is out there. This can happen happened to you, and then go on from there, right? Because personally, my mom never had the talk with me, right? So the talk that we all have, right? Puberty, all that, never had the talk. My sophomore year, my mom just started giving me these you know, like these little lectures, little rants about how I shouldn't have a boyfriend. And like, in my head, I was like, what? Like, boyfriend, relationship, what? Like, I don't get this, right? Like, why am I all of a sudden, like, always, like, being reminded, don't have a boyfriend, right? Like, how do you even get a boyfriend, first of all, right? Because I think, like, when you're in high school, you're just like how you're trying to fit into your high school, then you gotta go home and deal with your parents. Like, it's a mess, right? You're a mess yourself. So I think that like just that whole idea, it has to be normalized, and it's a cultural change, right? It can't just be, all right, like tomorrow we're gonna, you know, like create a change. No, it has to be a cultural movement, because it's an issue that lacks cultural sensitivity, because we as immigrant community, we have a different environment here than our parents did, you know, in their home country. And I think that's definitely not an excuse for our parents to kind of say that, oh, well, if we weren't allowed to do it, you can't do it. Because then we're here in a different community here. I'm integrated within this society right now, right? So I have to keep both aspects in mind.
So what I'm hearing, what I'm understanding, that it is very important to have communication, open communication between parents and teens, parents and children, so that they don't get scared to share their fear, whatever they are going through, their challenges with us, with parents, with trusted adults, so that even if they are going through any dating abuse or dating relationship, it's okay to talk to their parents about that issue, so that if they face any challenges, we can together we can face that challenge. We can help each other to understand the situation. It is always good to know the resources that can help when you are in abuse. And you know, when we were discussing this issue, Manrit, you raised a very important point, that mental health, and sometimes we ignore mental health. If we are having fever and we are sharing that information with a stranger, I'm having fever and, you know, I'm going to a doctor. But if we are having some mental health illness, we don't talk about this issue even with our family members, and that taboo needs to be gone. We should see mental health also as a important part of our life. Like if our children, they are facing mental health issue, and it is important for us to get proper help. If someone is thinking that, oh, it will go away, and if I go to a counselor, or if I see a doctor, for my son's or my daughter's mental health problem and or illness, and then the community will find out, log kya kahenge, what people will say. And that is a big issue that sometimes we put in front of our own children, and that shouldn't be the case. I'm not preaching here. I'm not, giving any gyan, any advice to any listener, but I'm just sharing my own thoughts that sometimes we fail to understand our children, the pain they are going through, and sometimes they see they are between they're seeing the clash between two cultures. At home we expect something, when they're out there in the community with their own peers, they see some other cultural challenges, nuances, and if we don't help them, then who will? And it is very important to talk about this issue with your children, to understand what they think. What is your thoughts on community's role in preventing teen dating violence? What community community members, not your family, not only your family, or other people, community can do to prevent? And can you share anything that you took responsibility as a bystander? Or because sometimes people don't understand that bystander, they can play a crucial role in preventing dating abuse. So can you share anything as a community member, as a friend, you did something as a bystander intervention?
Yes, I think as communities of color, specifically, most of us being first or second generation immigrants, I think we have to understand like the social implications and cultural implications of like how there's a lack of discussion about dating and dating violence in our community, mental health as well. So looking historically and like how we as a community can have these conversations, right? And looking at how we can do away with these structures of, sexism and other forms of isms that lead to like the lack of conversations, such as dating violence. So I think that's, as a community member, you have to be understanding of the space that you're in, and looking specifically how you can dismantle these, I guess, systems of oppression, if that makes any sense. And if you see something, say something, I don't think that's too hard to do, but I mean, it depends on the situation, I suppose.
So do you have any personal experience you want to share with us?
Yeah. So in high school, like it was mentioned earlier, it's very common for when these situations arise that you go to your friends. So I recall a friend of mine in high school, like, hey, this is what's going on. And I did notice a few changes in him, and I did reach out beforehand, but he didn't really open up until later about this person he was dating at the time. It was a very difficult situation. She was very manipulative, and they didn't really know how to understand or how to grapple with the situation, because he understood it to be like, oh, this is how it should be, like this is how a relationship should be. Like she had all his passwords. He was always like, oh, where are you at? Like once he got out of work, like, oh, like what are you gonna do right after? Like, I know you guys got off work. Like all these different things. So she knew what he was gonna do, and like at every moment. So it was very hard for him to like. He felt suffocated, so he didn't know what to do, and so. I think I just told him, like, hey, we got to figure this out. And then it was a very tough breakup for him, but he finally was able to overcome the situation. But it was after we talked to an adult who we trusted at school. Thankfully, that individual was someone that we trusted and we looked up to. So it was a difficult situation, but those are the situations that kind of play out. I feel like they still are common today.
So you raised a couple of good points here, but I would also, talk about that thing, because I have seen that many people think that, yes, if you see the statistics, more you will find that victims, survivors are women, female, and male are most of the cases, boys and men, the statistics is heavier. But here, people should know and people should understand that it can be other way around. Women can be abusive too. At Maitri, we get calls from male victims. They are abused by their female partner. And also the story you shared that she was abusive to him. And it's sometimes, if that is the case, many times men or boys, they feel uncomfortable reaching out for help, or they don't know how to share their feelings, their pain with someone else. They think that people will judge them. People will tell them that you are a boy, you are a man. How come you are abused by a female, something like that? So that kind of man box. I mean, we are pushing our boys to the man box, that if you are a man, you can say this thing or cannot say that thing. I'm glad that you shared that story. What about you guys? Do you want to share anything?
I think I would just like to add on that there's ways to kind of change negative diction into like positive reform methods, right? I think for one, as a South Asian woman, I've always had that idea of ijjat or anak very, very common, it's very present within our community. And I think it's always portrayed with a negative connotation. Like there's always that like, oh, well, women are the one that can never carry that ijjat. They're the only ones that can, like abuse it or like, kind of like, shaking it or whatever it may be, right? And there's always that dominance that men carry the ijjat, they carry the honor, and women are just there to, to make sure that they don't do anything to harm it, right? But I think there's positive ways to go about that, right? Like you don't have to necessarily put it in a negative way, right? So like anak, like it's a form of identity, right? So you can talk about with your kids, or like even like with anyone, with women, right? Like you can talk about that, how to change that, and how to change all these words and all these actions that we've been doing for so long within our community that are toxic, that are negative, that constantly degrade women, we can change those into ways of like positivity. And like you can talk about honor, right? Being a form of identity and it being individual, not being, your identity not being linked to your parents, right? Because I think constantly, like, I'm always told that idea how, like, I have to keep up with my parents' image or keep up with, what they're doing. But I feel like necessarily I don't have to. I respect them, but there's those boundaries that have to be set for me to live on my individuality, my identity. And I think that's very important to normalize within our society, because this is one of the key factors that keep children from interacting with their parents, keep children from being able to openly express their abuses, their traumas with their parents, because they're constantly worried about their image. And I can say that from personal experience, because when we just started 2020, but last year, I went through severe depression, and I talked to my parents about it. And my parents, when I told them that, I wanted to go to therapy, I think my mom was very hesitant, because she was like, oh, well, like when you're going to apply for jobs, what if they say that you're emotionally unstable, right? And I think like I was just so shocked, and like, obviously I'm used to it now, right? I've been with my parents for so long, so I'm used to it. I'm used to getting those kind of reactions from them. But I think when I reflect, by myself, I'm like, wow, like my parents are more worried about the image that I'm gonna have to society than my own like well-being, my own sanity, right? I think it's very, very, very important to normalize the idea of having your individuality, having your sanity, rather than, like Nandini was saying, loki ki kahenge, or like, like ijjat, anak, all those toxic ideas that are very present within our society.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And going back to the point that men carry the ijjat or the anak, and that they shouldn't ever face any type of mental illness. I feel like that's a very toxic idea within our culture, that if you're a male and you're going through mental illness, and if you tell someone, people are just gonna be like, oh, but you're a man, like, why are you going through this? Like, you shouldn't be going through this. That's like something that women go through. And also, like you were saying about mental illness, I was very hesitant to talk to my mom about it, because I knew she would react this way. She would say, oh, like, it's nothing, but I finally got the courage to talk to her about it. And I was really hopeful that, she wouldn't react that way, that, oh, she would understand over time, but time and time again, like, I would talk to her like, oh, maybe now she'll understand, but it was always the same response, that, oh, there's no such thing as depression, you're just sad for no reason. Or I feel like there's also this idea that parents have, especially immigrant parents, that our children haven't gone through the same things that we have. Like, we had to leave our homeland, we had to cross over to this country, we had to do all these things, we had to build ourselves up from nothing, and that our children don't have to do that, because we're providing for them, and therefore they shouldn't be facing any mental illness because they didn't go through the same problems that we have. And I think parents should also address that as well, because even though we're not going through those problems, there's many more problems arising day in day that we have to go through ourselves.
Thank you for this wonderful discussion. We are almost running out of time. I really don't want to end this discussion. If you and anyone you know are in an unhealthy dating relationship, creating a safety plan can be very helpful. Whether you decide to end the relationship or stay, it's a good idea to empower yourself with the knowledge of how to act in different scenarios. If you're listening, please note down this website, www.loveisrespect.org, and they have a section on create a safety plan. Please read that. Also, whenever you have time, check out the relationship spectrum on that website. This can tell you where your relationship falls. If you think that your friend or family members may be in an unhealthy or abusive relationship, one way to provide support is to ask questions about how they are feeling about the relationship and reflect on that together. Let them know that no matter what, you will be supporting them. You can provide them information on programs that they can use when they are ready